So the next stage is to lift the base plate and the aluminium arms in that we connect to the top frame and the top plate, which I'll also place on. So I'll lift the base plate and arms into place now. First, what I would do is I close the door and I move the arm forward for easier access. So I'm moving it forward, but I'm also bringing it towards me to make it easier to maneuver. So the base plate, aluminium arms and top frame are now installed. These are secured with the M10 nuts as I've shown in previous videos. To center it on the arm, just guide it into place. It takes a bit of effort to get it in position, but once it's in position, it doesn't need to be moved. This will generally remain in unless you're doing CT scans with the frame off. So I will show you the procedure to building up the top frame on top of the top plate here. But first, what I will do is now I'll lower it and move it all the way back, and it gives us room to move this out and on top of this. So you can see now that we have plenty space to get in and move the frame over and to the top of this. What I recommend is putting in the jack, the red jack, which is with the multi-axis equipment, and allow you to secure this whilst you're putting on the top frame. Although the top frame in this combination don't exceed the load of the arm, I think it's best to put that under just in case you lean on it whilst you're placing it on. Putting the top frame on top is actually quite challenging. One may be able to do it, but it's better if two people help to guide it in and avoid, catching the cables and so on underneath the frame. So it is a bit of a delicate process, and you should also watch when you're lifting the frame on top that you don't bump the motors against the lead roof. These are easily damaged, and as I mentioned in other videos, it's quite easy to damage the solder of the motors. So just be careful when you're doing that. Also be careful of the cone again and the detector at the back. Obviously these are very sensitive and expensive components of the CT scanner, so avoid striking those with the frame. So to lift the frame up, we first maneuver it out. Again, be careful when you're maneuvering it out here into the center. Generally I would lift up using the arms on either side up into the position. You can generally slide it over once you get the arms on. I've taken the excess cable and left it outside the frame, and this will allow you to avoid catching the delicate cables on the, I say they're delicate, I mean they will be okay, but you want to avoid catching them on the sharp edges or the sharp edges of the frame. Also, now that it's in this position, you will want to rotate it round so that the dual horizontal motors on that side are facing this side. That's the way I generally find it to be most suitable. It allows you to keep an eye on the belt drives when the system's running. Although they should be fine, it just allows you to keep an eye on them. So I'll go and do that now, rotate it round, and I'll show you afterwards how it's positioned. So you see now that the frame has been rotated, the motors are facing outwards of the frame, so we have a good line of sight for both of the belt drives. Whenever you're rotating the frame, be careful of the cone and just avoid hitting the target with any of the motors or the frame components. So to support the arm of the CT scanner, we want to use an A-frame jack. What I do is I lift the position of the arm up to where I think is suitable, and then I decide on the position of this jack. And then I use two pieces of acrylic, one at the top and the bottom, to spread the load across rather than putting a big point load on it. So then we put this underneath here and place this underneath, and then as you can see the small gap above it, we can then place a piece of acrylic, and then we just roll this out. Obviously it's a little bit harder, I only have one hand, but you only want to put it just so that it's placed against the base of the arm. It's not necessarily to put a lot of force on it, because obviously you're just supporting any additional load that's going on there, and you're not trying to lift the arm up at all. So once that's in place, you can lift on the top frame, and I'll show you the position of that in the next video. So now that you have your A-frame in place, the CT arm is supported, you can lift the multi-axis frame on top. I recommend you use two people, one to guide the cables and the other to lift on top and slide over. So when you're lifting it, as long as you tilt it up, and once you get the base of the beams and columns on here, you can slide it over onto the top, and then after we will do the bolt down procedure to secure the frame. But you can see how limited we are on space at the top, so just be careful when you're lifting it up there. So on each corner of the frame. We connect to the base plate using an M8 bolt, and then on the beams there are 3 bolt and nut combinations. These are M8 as well. There's a washer on either end. Doesn't really matter which direction you go, as long as you've got a washer on the top and the bottom, you're good to go. In terms of torquing, there are some indicative values in the manual which I use to secure the frame. Any other sorts of queries or questions related to securing the frame in place, you can have a look in the manual and there'll be a lot more information on exactly where the bolts go. Obviously I've shown you the 2 beam combination here, but we have the 6 hollow tube beam setup for the base plate, and we also have the large perspex chamber. In terms of the placement of components, the setup is very similar. In the case of the large perspex chamber, however, you will place that first with your sample in place, and note that when that's in place with the sample, because it's particularly heavy, you must have it secured with the arm at all times. You can't really move it around with the sample in there. So that means you need to do things like shading correction and any adjustments of the frame prior to putting the sample there. So it's quite challenging to do tests with the large chambers. Just bear that in mind if you have plans to do those.